Hello. Hello, everybody. So, I wanted to talk tonight about a lot. I'm trying to figure out like where I should start exactly because I feel like I have so many different things on my mind that I want to share. But tonight, I think I'm going to talk a little bit about childhood and what I experienced, but also like what others may have experienced that not a lot of people are aware of. So, growing up, I definitely, like I mentioned before, like I was born into domestic violence. So, there was a ton of different things happening before I was even born. And then once I was born, it was just kind of like the normal. I saw this picture online actually that was a picture of a little baby walking on eggshells, and it said my first steps was on eggshells. And I relate to that so much because um, I think growing up I didn't realize what I was experiencing because it was just so normal. But basically it was a really small house and there was just a ton of yelling and abuse on a regular basis. So, um, I'm the youngest of four, and the things that I witnessed is very normal for some people too. Like I, I was surprised to know that a lot of people resonated with the fact that like, oh, when you were in trouble, you got hit with wooden spoons, or you got hit with belts, or if you said a curse word, you got your mouth um, cleaned out with soap, like bars of soap. And it was like a regular conversation that I would have with some people in my life, like, oh, that happened to you too, like, yeah, me too, as if it was like normal. Like we were experiencing this stuff and nobody saw, if anything, it's like it's so deeply ingrained and generational that like my parents experienced that and then it just transcribed into the children. So like it's just generational trauma and generational abuse that's being passed down onto others. And that's why I resonate so much with being a cycle breaker, um, because it stops with my children. Like, my children will not be having this happen to the point where, like, then their children are going to experience it. Like, I'm stopping it now. Um, and yeah, so it's a bit heavy for me to even talk about because I'm trying to figure out like the best way to talk about this. Because I did not realize the extremities of how things were, honestly, until my son said something. Um, yeah, my son, he was 4 at the time, and he had told me, "Mommy, we're not around, my children's father. We're not around him anymore because of what he did to us. But we're around your parents, and they do this, 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 and this." And I was like, oh, I didn't even think of it like that. But it's like I did, but it didn't resonate until I heard my son say it. And I mean, that was a game changer, honestly. And I really am trying to figure out why the generational trauma and generational abuse has been so normalized. Like it truly bothers me. Um, because it comes up in conversation regularly with like support groups that I do. And, people are like, I went to private Catholic schools, and there was always this joke where it was like, oh, at least you didn't go to school when the nuns would hit you with rulers. And it's like, why? It wasn't okay back then, and it's not okay now. And a big thing that happened within my family was like, oh, you could never do that stuff now. It's like you couldn't do it then either, you know? Um, and so it just really bothers me that, you know, people almost laugh. They laugh it off. Like there was one particular circumstance that happened a couple years a couple years ago, I would say. Um, where we were at my sister's house, and my niece had we were getting ready for dinner, and we were sitting at the table, and my niece had come up to me and just, in regular conversation being like, oh, did this, happen to you? She basically, it's really hard to talk about, first of all, because it's publicly. And second off, because it's like, I don't know why this is so normal, but it really, I talk about this in therapy all the time, because it's like we were sitting down for dinner and this was a normal conversation for her. And she was like 6, maybe. Um, and she just, came up to me and was like, oh, so did, your parent um hit you with belts? And I was like, what do I even say? I looked at my sister and I was just like, what do I say? And then my sister stepped in and she said, um, yeah, we experienced that, but I mean, he would never do that now. And like, he wouldn't do that to you. And it was almost like, how confusing must that be for like my niece? Because I'm confused. Like I was just sitting at the dinner table like, what? And now we're just gonna like eat dinner. Like that is what really gets me, is because growing up, that's literally what would happen. Is like we would sit down at the dinner table, and like there would be like emotional abuse, like verbal abuse, mental abuse, like happening, but we're all supposed to be like sitting down at the table as if like nothing's happening. Or if we weren't sitting down at the table, and like one of my parents wanted to watch TV, and my other parent um, wanted to have a conversation. Um, like I just remember, like I was really young at the time. I remember like one of my parents standing in front of the TV, the other parent wanting to watch the TV. So now they're yelling at each other. And then, one of them said, move. And there was a lot of threats. And then the remote being thrown at one of my parents. And I'm just like, oh, what am I watching right now? And my other siblings are all watching it too. And, you know, again, I was like maybe 8 watching this. And this was just like a regular Tuesday. And so I'm like, okay, what am I even watching right now? Like, and then I didn't know what to do. And then one of my parents was hurt. And then the hurt parent is trying to tell one of my siblings like, hey, take pictures. And it was just like I could not even comprehend like what was even going on. And then the next day my parents were just like talking to each other regularly. Like what is going on right now? Like it's and this stuff is just so normalized. Like it's really really bothersome to me that, because the more I go to support groups, the more people talk about this, the more I'm like, wow, like it might not be the same exact situation, but it's similar, where you're like, oh yeah, it's fine. Like they fight. It's like, whoa. I don't think that's what this is. And the more that I'm learning, the more I'm like, yeah, no, this is definitely let's call it what it is. Like it's abuse. So let's call it for what it is. And I'm just so grateful for my 5-year-old, especially because he really started to put two and two together for me, where I was like, okay, yeah, like this is not okay. And so many people will say, um, they're your family, and like you need to be there for your family. Like you only have one family, you only have one mom, you only have one dad. Like you only like you like that is like projected on everybody. And so I was like, yeah, I have to, they're my family. Like I only have one family. And I think for me, because of everything that took place, like with my children's father, I was like, my kids don't have that side. And so like now they're not going to have my side either. And and my siblings, one of my siblings would say to me, um, you're choosing to isolate yourself. Like you have people in your life and you're choosing. And so I mean there was a lot, just like how like physical abuse was normalized in my family and like emotional and mental was normalized. Gaslighting was like a go-to that took place. And so like I didn't even realize what gaslighting was really. But when I heard it happening, like you're choosing to isolate yourself, like you're choosing this, you're choosing that. And I don't know, it's just like a really hard thing for me to talk about, honestly, because it's very confusing. It's really confusing. And it's very normalized. Like I remember having friends growing up and then being like, "Oh yeah, like that's just family stuff." It's like, "No, it's abuse. Like this is not okay." Like because then I'm this little human experiencing this at like 4, 5, 6, I mean even younger, but I didn't start like really remembering these things until like 4, 5, 6. And certain circumstances that took place is like my family would always like divide. Like it would be like my mom and me and my other sister, and then it would be like my dad, my brother, and my other sister, and it would be like we would be divided like all the time. There was always like division, like one side. And I remember I was really young. I was like maybe like 6, and me and one of my siblings, the one who was closest in age with me, my parents were fighting, and like we both were like, all right, we gotta be with mom, like we were like picking like who we were gonna go be with. And I think it was late at night, I think we were supposed to be in bed, and me and that sister decide like, okay, we're gonna go in the car and mom's not gonna know. And so me and that sister, we went in the car and we hid in the back seats with like our stuffed animals and our pajamas, and like we're terrified. And my mom had no idea we were in the car. And she just like kept driving, and she was talking to herself, crying. And um, I me and my sister are just like looking at each other like we don't know where we're going. We don't know what our next move is. We just know like we want to be there for like our mom. And it was, I mean, our little minds, like we didn't understand what was even happening. And I think eventually I ended up being like, because my mom was like openly talking and to herself and she had no idea. And I think at one point I was just like, but I love you. And then she like slammed on the brakes and she's like, whoa, I didn't know you guys were back there. And it's like, yeah. Like that's one circumstance where, but that was like my normal. That was our normal. And like me and my siblings have all undergone this trauma, but like this is my perspective, like this is my experience. And like each one of my siblings have their own experiences. And my mom, my dad have like their own experience, like their own perception of how, but like I'm this little kid, and this is what is being taught to me, like what is being shown to me, like this is a marriage, like this is a mother and a father, like these are your siblings, like this is how we treat people, this is how. So I literally went through life thinking like, oh, okay, so like if I need to, if I want to like do something and someone's in my way, throw something at them. Like that's literally what I thought was, Or like if nobody wants to have a conversation with you right now, it's like, okay, leave, get in your car, drive away, like separate. And like, I don't know what I was even being taught, but it was really confusing. And I'm still trying to work through it in therapy. Um, this is like even more harder to talk about than my last live. And my last live was like pretty intense, but so someone said the gaslighting is constant in these situations, the blame game too. Keep it in the family, keep it private. You don't want people to get the wrong idea. And definitely the you're causing the problem. Your abusers hurt us. Oh, our abusers hurt us and then refuse to take responsibility. Yeah, totally. Um, I mean that is like exactly like I can't explain how many times it was like reversed. Like and then like all of a sudden it's now my fault. So like as a kid, I don't think anything, I mean it's hard to like put faults on people, but like as a kid, I was just watching this and taking it in and like being real confused. So I don't know if I like feel guilt or anything for like picking my mom in the moment. Like I don't really know because I was just so young. Like I don't think I could really make that decision. Um but as I got older and like as I started to have my own thoughts, um, that's where it got tricky because it's like I wanted to speak up for myself, like I wanted to say something, but I just did not know how to say it and if I was going to be okay if I said it. Like it was a really small house and like if we didn't listen, like it was like we were going to get hit with belts. And I remember like specifically hiding. Like we had so there were three girls, you know, me, the youngest, and then my brother was the only boy. And so like the girls had the girls' room and then there was my brother's room and you know, so me and my sisters are sharing the room and like we were put to bed. We were supposed to be quiet. And the one who was closest in age with me would like we would play these games together and it was like oh, get a pillow. And like, if we wanted a snack or something, we would have to like slide on our bellies to like go get the snack and pretend like try just hope that like mom and dad didn't see us because they were watching TV in the living room. And I mean, it wasn't much distance, but it was terrifying because we're like, we can't have them see us. So we would get on our bellies on the pillow and like slide. I think like my sister would like push me and then like I would push her. Like I don't remember exactly how it went down, but it was something like that. And then we would secretly get snacks and like come back. But like if they ever heard us, it was like it was bad. Like I remember like going up, I had the top bunk for most of my life. Sometimes we would switch off, but like for most of my life I had the top bunk. And I remember like sometimes it wasn't even me who made a noise. And it was like we had to like blame our siblings or like protect our siblings. Like it was really hard, but like we would like I just remember specifically being like hiding in the top corner of the bunk bed, like hoping that I was not going to get whipped with a belt, like being terrified and like shaking and like running in the top bunk with like the ceiling like right here over my head and I'm like just please don't hit me like please and then I would end up getting hit and like half the time I don't think it was even me and I was like the target. You know, that's how I felt at least. And I mean, it was just really scary. And that was like ever since a young kid. And then there were circumstances with my mom, like where it was like, um, you know, anything in her sight, like she would just throw. Like I remember a specific time where she like just got a stool and like threw it at my brother and my brother moved out of the way and it went through the window. Um, but like these things were just normalized. And like what's really confusing is um it was like they were able to be themselves but also like have this like abusive nature if that makes sense. um where it was like they could be abusive, like they could say like really mean things towards one another in front of like my friends or my friends parents and like people would just laugh and like laugh it off. And that's what I'm trying to say about like things are normal. Like it's normalized. And people are like, "Oh yeah, it's just like who he is." And like, "Oh, that's just like what he says." And it's like, "Whoa, but look at the disrespect. Like look at how." So I don't know, like there were a lot of people that would just come to our house all the time. And I'm so curious to see like did they see it too? Um, and like did they just not, because it's like how do you get involved? Like do you, and like we were kids. So I recently decided to not have contact with my family, like my parents and siblings, um and that was like really tough. But like I said, it was like my 5-year-old that really got me to like understand. Um, but like now that I'm an adult, it's like I can make that decision. And but it's like I almost like wasn't allowed to make that decision at the same time. So the more that I was like, no, I'm making this decision, the worse it got for me. And the abuse was getting more intense. And some things that took place like at my parents' home last year, um, I always wonder, I'm like, if I had the people in my life now, like my therapist and my support group, like if they were there, like how would that have gone down? Like, because some people that were there, like saw what was happening and it was almost like nobody stepped in. Like nobody stood up to my dad or my mom when it was happening. It was just kind of like I'm the kid. And it's like I'm not a kid. I'm 29, like I'm going to be 30. Like I have my own kids. And the specific circumstance that took place last summer at my parents' house, it was like this was in front of my kids, this was in front of my sister and her kids, like, and my I really don't know. Like I can't speak for them, but I really don't know if like my family sees it or if they're ever going to see it. But I wasn't the first cycle breaker. I haven't seen my brother in almost 9 years, and he was the first one to leave, and I'm very proud of him. Um, I I haven't talked to him. I mean, it's just I get it now. Like I really get it, and I think a part of me when I was young was starting to get it because I left my family when I was 18 and chose to leave them because of the abuse. Like, I'll get real deep right now. I was really not wanting to be with my parents like so badly that I chose to be homeless. Like, I literally chose to live in a tent in the winter. And like, not many people know this about me, so I'm just laying it all out right now. Yep, I literally chose a mile away from their house. I had like recently just turned 18. And it was actually Christmas Eve that I decided this. And then Christmas Day, I literally like went to Walmart, bought a tent, got tarp, and camped out for like 3 to 4 months because that's how much I mean, it did not make any sense at all. Like to go live in a tent. Like I didn't have anywhere else to go. But um it's like that's how, and that wasn't my first, like that was my first time like being homeless, but like it wasn't my first time like wanting to be somewhere else. Like there were these kids that lived like a couple of houses down from me that they were younger than me, but I just like would make friends with people like anywhere I went just to like not be home. So when I found out that there were like these young kids that lived 2 houses down from me, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go to their house. Like I'm gonna have dinner with them. Like I'm gonna like escape basically. And that's what I would do. I basically like became their babysitter. And I was like 11 and their parents were not like letting me be alone with the kids, but they it was basically like my first babysitting job where it was like I was allowed to be supervised babysitting these young kids. The youngest was like 3, the oldest was like 5. and I would have dinner with them every night. I just basically would do that with a lot of people because I didn't want to be home. And I lived on a main road, and I would just like take my bike and like go down the nearest neighborhood so that I could like get away from my parents. And um like I said, like me and my siblings experienced this in our own separate ways. We all had our own personalities and we all dealt with it the best way that we knew how. And some of my siblings are still dealing with it, I think. I don't know because I don't talk to them anymore, but like I think some of them are still, and maybe they don't see it still, or maybe they see it and like I don't know, but I know that I finally get it now, and um that none of it's okay. And I'm telling you, it is literally my 5-year-old who got me to understand it, because when he voiced that to me, I was like, wow, that is so hypocritical of me, because it's like, here we are. Like, I have a permanent restraining order against my children's father. And, thankfully now he's a convicted felon for everything that he's done. I mean, he's not held accountable for everything that he's done, but he is being held accountable for some of those things. And for my 5-year-old, who was 4 at the time, to say something like that to me, I was like, wow, this is serious. I did not even. And then it's like, what do I say to him? Like, how do I respond? Like, he's right. So then the more that I involved myself around my family, the more I was like, I can't just take what my son said and like not do something about it. Like, I have to protect my son. I have to protect my babies. I have to protect myself. Like, I wasn't doing that. I was just like walking, letting them walk all over me for my whole life. And that includes my siblings. But again, I don't like to like put blame either and like fault, because my siblings were kids too. Like, they were doing the best that they knew too. So we were just doing what we were taught. And there's circumstances, even in my own life, where I was a bully and I was doing things to people that I didn't know why I was doing it, but it was like I was being shown this. And so then, therefore, I was doing it. Um, and it's just not okay. Like, kids don't need to be exposed to this. And so that's why I call myself a cycle breaker now, because my kids may have witnessed things and things may have happened to my kids, but it's not going to get passed down into their kids. Like, we are, like, my 5-year-old's in therapy, like I'm in therapy. Um, my babies are 2 and 1. So I mean, my 5-year-old started therapy at 3. So like, if my kids need therapy, like, they're gonna be in therapy. And therapy is amazing. Like, everybody should be in therapy, honestly. I'm a major supporter of therapy. um, but yeah, I was really nervous to talk about this tonight, honestly, because, and like I said, like, I want to talk about so much. Um, but a lot of stuff is still happening. Um, like in court processes and things like that. So it's a little nerve-wracking sometimes, because I'm like, should I? And it's like, yes, because nobody's going to take away my voice. Like, I have my voice. And I also really just want people to know that they're not alone. Like, I want to spread awareness, because maybe some of you who will listen to this can relate, and they're like, yeah, I had to go through that too, and wow, it was normalized. And because that is what shocks me the most. So the more I talk about the stuff, the more people are like, I had no idea. Like, I've already been experiencing this after my first 2 lives, people messaging me and being like, whoa, I didn't even realize this. And they're looking inwards, and like, because if we can all heal ourselves, we can all heal ourselves. We just have to get to the root of it first. And then when we do that, there's so much to unpack, but we can do it. So that's what I'm trying to do. Um, and thank you all so much, for listening, for those who've joined live and who'll listen later. I never prepare for these things. I just kind of go with what is going to come out. So I appreciate you guys listening to me. It means a lot. And for those of you who have reached out to me too, that really does mean so much to me, because a lot of the people are from my past, who may have their own perspective of what they saw too. So I'm going to sign off, but thank you guys so much and take care.